Imagine walking quickly down any street and suddenly stopping, completely paralyzed, because a voice coming from the ground cuts through the noise of the cars and goes straight to your heart. A dirty, barefoot woman, hugging a dog and a bag of cans, is sitting on the sidewalk, singing. But it's not just any song, it's a song filled with pain, with soul, with truth. And there, right in front of everyone, in the middle of the city that stops for no one, an extremely wealthy man, one of those who have everything except peace, begins to cry. Yes, he cried, the owner of one of the continent's greatest fortunes, the man who never stopped for anyone, burst into tears at the voice of a woman the world ignored every day. What was in that song? Who was this woman who moved him so much? And what happened between them after that inexplicable moment? This is a true story, raw and full of twists and turns that will leave you shivering. A story of profound pain, injustice and ridicule, but also of encounters that change destinies. A woman treated like trash, who turns out to be a rare gem. A powerful man, wounded inside, who rediscovers the meaning of life on a sidewalk. And what happens next will shake everything you believe about luck, destiny, and merit. Prepare your heart, because what begins with a song in the street will end with a public revelation, a packed stage, and the entire world on its knees before a voice that no one wanted to hear, until it was too late. Watch until the end. Every second of this story carries a piece of you, and in the end you'll understand why. God hides his greatest miracles in the places the world most despises. She walked the same streets every day, with the same bag on her back, her cracked feet and her lost gaze. She slept right there under the awning of an old building, where the wind cut through her soul and concrete was the only mattress she knew. Did it rain? It dampened her dreams. Did it shine? It fried her hope. But what hurt most, and this Clarice never said out loud, was the way people pretended she didn't exist. She could scream, fall, cry. No one looked. It was as if she'd become invisible, as if her existence wasn't even worthy of pity. The only thing she still had was her voice, a hoarse, suffering voice, but with something magical, something that carried pain, faith, and a stubborn hope that everything could still change. Every day, around 5 in the afternoon, Clarice would pick up an old tin can, beat it like a drum, and begin to sing. It wasn't for fun, nor to make money, though sometimes a coin would fall out. She sang because if she didn't, she'd fall apart. It was as if, as she sang, the pain had less room inside her, and even hungry, even thirsty, even with her shoulders marked by the weight of the sack of cans, she poured her soul into each note. The strangest thing? No one noticed. They passed by, laughed, turned their faces away, but she kept singing. And there, in that corner of the sidewalk, something was born that many people have forgotten to feel: humanity. The most unbelievable thing is that, even living what she lived, Clarice still managed to look around and care about another living being. She had a dog, a skinny stray with one floppy ear, who would appear whenever the smell of garbage revealed someone had left food scraps nearby. She called him Nego. No one knew where he came from, not even she. He just showed up one day and stayed. Ever since, they were sidewalk companions. When she made a few bucks selling cans, or when some kind soul left a loaf of bread on the windowsill, she would share it. Literally, she would tear it in half. One half for her, the other for Nego. Sometimes she would keep the smaller part, and she would smile. He had no teeth, but he had a soul. She smiled with her heart. It was as if, amidst all this hardship, sharing with that dog was the only thing that reminded her she still had value. She was still human. One day she found a 2-real coin lying near a stand. It was like winning the lottery. You could have bought a loaf of fresh bread, a whole loaf, all her own. But no, she went to the market, bought a package of cookies, and gave them to Nego. Then she went back to collecting cans, as if nothing had happened, but it had. Those who witnessed that scene, and there weren't many, perhaps felt something strange in their hearts, perhaps a pang of shame, perhaps a forgotten reminder that there are still people who, even with next to nothing, are capable of giving everything. What no one knew was that while she lived this invisible routine, someone was watching her. It wasn't just any onlooker. It was a man in an expensive suit and clean shoes, but with a tired look. He drove past there every day, going to meetings, signing contracts, making money, lots of money, but he'd lost something along the way, something money couldn't buy, and it was in that dirty woman, with her bare feet and trembling voice, that he found what he didn't even know he was looking for. The first time he heard her voice, he didn't understand what he was feeling, he just felt it, and he stopped. He stopped the car, stopped his thoughts, stopped time. He stood there, saying nothing, listening. Clarice sang as if telling a secret, and he listened as if desperately needing to hear some truth. But that's another part of the story. For now, what matters is understanding that that woman, so despised, so ignored, had something the modern world has forgotten: true compassion. And it's curious how sometimes you have to lose everything to find what truly matters. Clarice lost her home, her family, her health, even her name. No one knew her name anymore, but she didn't lose her heart. And that would be the beginning of something no one could have imagined. Because some stories seem small, but carry an entire world within them. And hers was just beginning. But what that man would do after hearing that song is something that will leave you speechless. But before that, something even more powerful was about to happen. Something no one, not even her, expected to experience that cold night. Did this story touch you in any way? Did you cry? Feel a tightness in your chest? Think of someone or even yourself? Then you're part of a rare breed of person. People who truly feel, who still believe that good is worthwhile, who understand the pain of others as if it were their own. Here we tell stories that move, inspire, and show that even in the most forgotten corners of Africa, there are hidden miracles. Come be part of this beautiful community that values stories with soul, with truth, with the strength we carry within. Click the subscribe button now and like it, because those who feel share. And here, each story has a little piece of you. And it was on a grey afternoon, the kind where the sky seems angry at the world, that Clarice experienced one of the most humiliating scenes of her life. And she'd already been through so much that most people couldn't bear to watch, let alone live through it. She sat in the same corner as always, with the same bag of cans, the dog by her side, her voice stuck in her throat, waiting for a moment of calm to sing. It was the only way she knew how to ease the pain. She sang to keep from freaking out, to keep from disappearing inside herself. But that day, it felt like even that would be taken from her. The street was bustling. People were coming and going, all in a hurry, carrying bags, briefcases, cell phones, and a rush that never made sense to someone who had nothing else. Clarice was just there, quiet, peaceful in her corner, until a well-dressed man with an arrogant expression appeared. He was one of those types who arrives looking down on you. He accidentally bumped into her bag of cans and, without even looking properly, let out a scream that cut through the air. "Watch your step, you stinker!" She tried to apologize, even though she hadn't done anything, but he wouldn't listen, and it got worse. He looked at her with disgust, as if she were an animal, and without thinking twice, or maybe thinking, which would be even crueler, he tipped a bucket of dirty water right over her. At the time, she was in shock. Water ran down her face, into her eyes, soaking the thin, torn clothes she'd been wearing for days. Her hair stuck to her forehead. Her body went cold. And before she could react, she heard something that still echoes in her memory. "Go to work, you bitch. Stop singing like crazy. This is no place for a homeless person to perform." He didn't shout it quietly. He shouted it for everyone to hear. And that was what hurt the most, because no one did anything. No one approached. No one said a word in her defense. They just stared. Some laughed. Others kept walking, as if this were normal, as if she deserved it. Clarice, in that moment, cringed. She didn't cry, because it seemed she'd already used up all the tears her body could produce. She just sat there, her body wet, sitting on the sidewalk, with Nigo licking her hands, as if he were the only creature in the world who still cared about her. And maybe he was. And that, oddly enough, was what kept Clarice from collapsing completely. That puppy, hungry and thirsty just like her, looked at her as if to say, "Don't give up, not now." And she didn't. She got up. She picked up the bag. She wiped her eyes. And she sang. Again. Her voice even hoarser, more tired. But she sang. And then comes a moving part. Because despite everything, despite the humiliation, Clarice wouldn't stop singing. And this bothered many people. Not because she was out of tune, but precisely because it was the opposite. Her voice was strong, it had feeling, it had history, and that moved people. But instead of seeing it as talent, as something beautiful, people preferred to mock it. It was easier to laugh than to acknowledge the pain behind that melody. Clarice had heard it all. Does this crazy woman think she's a singer? Go take a shower first, then sing. That woman is just another dirty girl seeking attention. And she listened in silence, not because she didn't care, but because she learned that arguing with people who only know how to judge is a waste of soul. The truth is, no one knew where that voice came from. No one wondered why a woman living on the streets sang with such emotion. It was easier to say, she was crazy, thrown away by society like trash. But what no one, absolutely no one, knew was what that voice held, because Clarice had a past. She had a story no one there could have imagined. And the way she sang, it was the only way she found to not forget who she once was. But there's one thing life does sometimes out of nowhere. It changes everything. And on that sidewalk, while she was still reeling from the humiliation, there was someone who couldn't look away. Someone who, unlike the crowd, didn't have the courage to laugh. Someone who felt a shiver run down their spine, hearing that trembling voice coming from a body drenched in humiliation. And it wasn't just anyone, but this is still to come. For now, all I can say is that moment, that terrible scene, was the turning point no one saw coming, because it's always like that. When it seems like everything is over, when everyone has turned their backs, when the world shows its dirtiest face, that's when sometimes life surprises, and Clarice was about to experience something she wouldn't have dared to imagine even in her wildest dreams. But that, well, you'll see that soon, because what happened next will show that no one should be judged by appearances, and that there are people who listen with their hearts. Clarice no longer cared about who passed by. After all that, after the dirty water, the screams, the mocking laughter, she just wanted to sing, to stay alive inside. It was as if, in that moment, her voice was the only safe place left, so she took a deep breath and began. The melody was soft at first, like someone still struggling to believe they deserved to be heard. But 3 notes were enough for the sidewalk to gain new energy. Those passing by didn't notice anything. Just another woman singing in the middle of the street. But on the other side of the avenue, inside a dark car with the windows half rolled down, someone noticed and stayed. He'd been passing that street for days, always at the same time. He was a man who drew attention unintentionally, not for his well-cut suits nor his expensive car, but for his silent way of observing the world, as if he'd seen too much. That day, something made him stop. Really stop. He pulled the car over to the corner, turned off the engine, and stood there, just staring, his eyes fixed on that woman who'd just been humiliated and yet was singing. It made no sense to him, or maybe it made more sense than anything he'd ever experienced, because there was something in that voice that was impossible to ignore. It was a familiar pain. It was like hearing a piece of the past, of a time when he still believed in people. Clarice didn't see the car. She didn't see the man. Her eyes were closed, singing with what little breath and soul she had left. But he saw everything. He saw the dog lying nearby. He saw the wet clothes clinging to her body. He saw her hands trembling. He saw the people passing by as if she were nothing. And there, without understanding why, he began to feel something he hadn't felt in a long time, a desire to cry. It wasn't just pity. It wasn't just compassion. It was identification. It was as if, in some strange way, he too was on that sidewalk, dirty inside, even with his clothes on. And it was there, sitting on that leather seat, with the air conditioning off and his heart beating differently, that he did something no one had planned. He got out of the car. With slow steps, he crossed the street, still unsure of what he was going to say. He only knew he needed to be closer to that voice. Maybe it was madness. Maybe it was destiny, but something there was calling him. And when Clarice opened her eyes and saw that man standing in front of her, silent, his eyes full of tears, she froze. For a second she thought it was someone else coming to humiliate her. But no, he didn't say anything. He just looked. A long, direct look, heavy with emotion but light on judgment. It seemed like he was trying to say something, but the words just couldn't come out. And it shook her. No one had ever looked at Clarice like that. Not there, in that condition, not with so much respect. This was new, strange, even frightening. And he didn't understand what he was doing either. He only knew that that woman on that sidewalk with that voice had stirred something he'd forgotten existed. And that's how it all began, with a look, a silence, and an inexplicable connection between. Two pains that seemed made to meet. But what this man would do next you won't believe, because what seemed like just an unlikely encounter would soon become the beginning of a twist no one, not even Clarice, could have imagined. And that's when the story really begins to change. Clarice was still trying to understand what had happened the day before. That image wouldn't leave her mind. The man standing there, looking at her with teary eyes, as if he'd seen something the rest of the world, insisted on ignoring. It wasn't common. In fact, it had never happened before. People like him, with that look of having everything, usually drive straight past, roll up the window and accelerate. But not him. He stayed. And the strangest thing, he didn't say anything. He just looked, listened, felt. And then he left, leaving a strange mixture of fear, confusion, and a glimmer of hope. But Clarice wasn't stupid. She'd seen too many people promise the world and then turn their backs. So, when the sun came up the next day, she just got up, shook out the bag of cans, gave Nigo a piece of stale bread, and went to do what she did every day, survive. But that day wasn't going to be like any other, because just when her biological clock told her it was time to start singing, more to soothe her soul than to attract coins, there he was again. Same car, same elegant suit, same look. And this time, without hesitation, he got out of the car, crossed the street, and sat on the ground. That's right, on the ground, beside her, without worrying about the dirty sidewalk, without looking around, without any shame. He simply bent down and said, in a calm, almost broken voice, "Can you sing for me again?" Clarice froze, because for her, it was surreal. No one approached, no one sat down, no one asked for anything. At most, they threw coins, sometimes in anger, sometimes out of obligation. But that man, he was there because he wanted to listen, and there was no laughter, contempt, no rush in his eyes, only a kind of emotional curiosity, as if that song held something he desperately needed to feel again. And she sang, again, not out of obligation, nor for money. She sang because he asked. She sang because, in some strange way, she felt he deserved to hear it. And there, in those simple notes, in that voice still tired, dirty, trembling with cold, something inexplicable was born. They didn't exchange pretty words. They didn't tell each other stories. They didn't ask each other names. But it was as if their pain recognized the other's scars. As she sang, he closed his eyes. And he stood there, still, breathing deeply. It seemed as if every word, every note, every pause went straight to a place inside him that hadn't been visited in a long time. Clarice noticed. She felt it, and that gave her the strength to sing with more conviction. For the first time in a long time, her voice wasn't just a rant thrown to the wind. It was being heard, truly, by someone, who listened not just with their ears but with their soul. And you know what was strangest? People walked by, many looked, some whispered, but no one dared interrupt. Maybe because they didn't know what they were seeing. Maybe because, for the first time, the person on the ground didn't seem to be the weakest person in the scene. There was something there that even judgment couldn't grasp. And when she finished, when the last note faded into thin air, he took a deep breath, looked at her with a respect that seemed impossible to put into words, and simply said, "Thank you." Clarice didn't answer. She didn't need to either, because there, on that sidewalk where everything was contemptuous, a rare thing happened. Two different worlds collided, not out of charity nor pity, but out of connection. And that changes everything, because now, what he'll do after feeling this, that's when the story begins to take a turn. And when I say a turn, I mean the kind of twist no one, not Clarice, not him, imagined they'd experience. And trust me, what comes next will send shivers down the spines of even those who thought they were beyond emotional. The next day, Clarice expected something to be different. After that mysterious man returned and sat beside her, asking her to sing again, something inside her ignited. A small, timid flame, but one that hadn't been there for a long time. That flame had a name, hope, but along with it came fear. Because every time something good tried to blossom in Clarice's life, The world seemed to find a way to stamp it down, and that's exactly what happened. That morning she woke up a little early. She hadn't even slept well, to tell the truth. Her head was spinning, remembering the look in his eyes, the way he breathed during the song as if he were being healed from within. And even without understanding why, she began to prepare herself as if she were about to attend something special. She wiped her face with a wet cloth, fixed her hair as best she could, tied the cloths covering her body tighter, and said to Nigo, "Today we sing with more courage, okay?" But the street, that street that had always been cold, was even crueler that day. Because now, beyond her previous invisibility, Clarisse began to attract attention, not for her music, not for her talent, but for the constant presence of that elegant man, who now stopped his car, got out, sat next to her, and just stayed there, just listening. People like him didn't do that. And people started to notice, and whisper and laugh. At first it was just a sidelong glance, but it only took 3 or 4 curious onlookers for everything to go wrong. A group of street vendors standing ahead blurted out the first, "Oh, look at that crazy karaoke girl, got a rich fan now, huh?" Another responded, laughing out loud, "Now she thinks she's going to become an artist. Is she going to release an album with her boss right there?" And so it began. The jokes came one after the other. People making fun, imitating her voice, passing by with ironic applause, recording with hidden cell phones. "Hey, singer, sing that one about suffering again. Get a feature with him and get off the sidewalk, huh?" And all the while she tried to maintain her composure. She tried to remain steadfast, but each comment was like a stone to the chest. Clarisse wasn't used to affection, but she had grown accustomed to contempt. But this kind of mockery was different. It was a mix of mockery and envy, as if the mere possibility of her being seen as someone worthy of attention bothered people, because deep down, they couldn't bear the idea that someone so mistreated by life could experience something beautiful, even if it was just being heard for a few minutes. And him, the man beside her, he remained seated, silent. He didn't answer, didn't retort, didn't explain himself. He just looked around with a kind of firmness that left some embarrassed. It was as if he were saying, with his gaze, "Laugh, but you don't know what I know." And that made the mockery even more bitter, because no one understood what he was doing there. And what people don't understand, they attack. Clarisse pretended not to hear, but she heard everything, and every laugh hurt, not because she wanted fame, money, or applause, but because everything she was experiencing there was so rare, so precious, so different, that it hurt to see it treated as a joke. She wanted to cherish that moment, protect it, like someone who keeps a flower in a dry place, but the street wouldn't let her. Still, she didn't stop. Neither did he. And it was in this contrast, between the contempt of the voices outside and the respectful silence of those nearby, that the connection between them grew even stronger. Because when the whole world points a finger and a single person extends a hand, we understand where true value lies. Clarisse knew that, no matter how much they mocked, there was something real there. And he knew it too. But what neither of them knew yet was where this would all lead. Because that man wasn't just listening for the sake of listening. He was there for a much deeper reason. A reason Clarisse would discover very soon. And when she did, the tables would turn in a way no one, absolutely no one, would be able to pretend they hadn't seen. The night fell heavily, the kind where even the sky can't hold back the tears, pouring down a fine, persistent drizzle that soaks you to the bone. Clarisse was used to sleeping wet, her stomach growling, and Nigo curled up next to her trying to get any warmth he could. But that night, something was different. And it wasn't just the weather, it was the air. There was a strange atmosphere on the street, a tension in people's eyes. The movement was the same as always, but the looks, those curious eyes that at first merely whispered, now were charged with something else. Envy, anger, provocation. Ever since the mysterious man appeared, the one who would come, sit on the floor next to her and ask her to sing, the buzz had grown. People couldn't handle it. People who had barely looked at her began to grow annoyed by the attention she was receiving. She's just a beggar. Why is this rich guy hanging out with her? You must be taking advantage, or you're just as crazy. And Clarisse, who just wanted to continue her survival routine, now found herself surrounded by heavy gazes, twisted mouths, and nasty comments. And Worst of all, she sensed something was about to happen, like a storm that announces itself in the scent of the air. It was almost midnight when it all happened. Clarisse had found a corner a little drier than usual, next to a disused tent, and lay down with Nigo, curled up, hugging the bag of cans, all she'd managed to gather during the day. It wasn't much, but it would provide at least some bread and water for the next day, and for someone living on the ground, that's a lot. She was almost dozing off when she heard footsteps. Many, quick, and familiar voices, but with a tone she'd never heard before. "It's her, the neighborhood starlet," someone shouted. "The playboy's new girlfriend," another mocked. When Clarisse opened her eyes, it was too late. 3 people, 2 women and a man, were on top of her. Their faces were covered in hoods of rage, their fists clenched in resentment. She tried to get up, but a kick to the stomach knocked her back to the ground. "You think you're better than us now, do you?" one of the women shouted, grabbing her hair tightly. Clarisse tried to protect herself, cowering, not understanding what was happening. "Just because a rich man sat next to you, you think you're something now?" The other spat. No one came to help. No scream stopped the attack. The entire street pretended not to see, as it always did. Nigo tried to fight back, barked, bit the air around him, but was kicked away. Clarisse, amidst the slaps, punches and pulls, didn't scream. She just cried. He was crying in a way that didn't come from physical pain, but from within, from a place only those who have been humiliated by being seen as nothing know. And just when he thought it was over, the worst happened. Someone snatched her bag of cans, her only possession, and ran. "Now sing, street performer," the last woman shouted before running after him. Clarisse lay there, lying on the wet floor, her body aching and her soul completely broken. And even though she was wounded, even though she was bleeding inside and out, all she could think was, "Why? What did I do to deserve this?" She just wanted to live. She just wanted to sing in peace. She just wanted to exist without being trampled on. But it seems that, for many people, a poor woman who smiles, who is noticed, who has talent, bothers them, and really bothers them. When day broke, Clarisse was the same, lying down, exhausted, hugging Nigo, who had returned and was licking her face with a sad look. She no longer had any cans, no bread, no courage to sing. Everything seemed lost, everything. But it was always in these moments that life, the kind that seems cruel and cold, showed signs it wasn't over yet. And as Clarisse tried to get up, supporting the weight of the world in her weak arms, she had no idea that that dark night would be the last rock bottom she would face alone, because someone saw, and that someone hadn't come by chance. He saw what no one wanted to see, and what he would do after. That would change everything. But that is what you'll see in the next part of this story. Because when pain finds the right gaze, life turns upside down, and sometimes that's exactly what it needs. Clarisse had barely slept in the days that followed. After the beating she'd received and the theft of her cans, it felt like everything she'd built, even if it was little, even if it was just dignity, had been forcibly ripped away. Her body still ached, her face was scarred, and her soul was in a dark place, the kind that seemed to have no return. She had stopped singing, not out of fear, but because, for the first time, she questioned whether it was even worth it, whether anyone still cared. Not even Nigo, with his sad, faithful eyes, could coax a song from her. Even the silence of the street seemed crueler now, and the mysterious man had also disappeared. He didn't return the next day, or the next, or the next. And that's when Clarisse, lying on the sidewalk, covered with cardboard, heard a conversation that made her freeze. 2 young women carrying grocery bags were talking loudly, laughing and showing each other their cell phones. "Did you see that? It's that guy who used to sit with that crazy woman down the street, girl." "Yes, the man is famous, a billionaire. He owns a record label. He was on the show today. He talked about the beggar." Clarisse's heart raced. Billionaire, record label, beggar. She tried to get up, her body still aching, but curiosity got the better of her. She walked slowly to an appliance store where the news was always playing with the sound on. She stopped at the door, leaned against the glass, and that's when she saw him. Him, the man who had sat with her, the same suit, the same look. Only now, on television. The backdrop was a luxurious studio. He was being interviewed live, on national television. And this wasn't just any show. It was the most watched show of the morning. "We're here with Charles Mboko," founder and president of Central Africa's largest record label, responsible for developing artists who are now global successes, the host said, with the enthusiasm of someone who knows they're in the presence of a living legend. And then, mid-conversation, she asked, smiling, "And you, Charles, with so much talent in the world, where did you find your latest inspiration?" He stopped. He looked straight into the camera, and with calm firmness, he replied, "On the sidewalk." The presenter laughed, thinking it was a joke, but he continued, "I found a woman who has no home, no family, no security whatsoever, but she has something no one else around her had, soul. She has a voice that carries more truth than many a luxury studio, and when she sang, it was as if she'd flipped a switch inside me." He placed a hand on his chest. "This woman saved my wounded heart." Clarice gasped. His image was still there, on the screen. And then he said, "Live, to millions of people. I still don't know her name, but her voice, I'll never forget it. She reminded me of who I was before success, before fame. She reminded me that real music doesn't come from numbers. It comes from pain, from life. And she has the voice of an angel." At that moment, Clarice didn't know whether to cry, laugh, or run. The world, which until then had only walked past her, was suddenly hearing about her. Truly, for the first time, someone had seen her. And what's more, they had recognized her, not as a burden, not as a crazy woman, not as the woman on the street corner, but as someone who still had value, someone who deserved to be remembered. The entire store began to crowd in front of the TV. Customers, clerks, even the security guards stopped to watch. People nudged each other. "It's the woman on the corner, the one who sings over there near the market. That's who he's talking about." And then, without Clarice noticing, all eyes began to turn to her. And in that second, she understood. This wasn't just an interview. It was the beginning of a change. But she didn't yet know how big that change would be, because what Charles Mboko would do after leaving that studio went far beyond pretty words on TV. And when he appeared again, it wouldn't be as the mysterious man on the sidewalk. It would be as the man who was willing to transform her life, with a decision the whole world would talk about. But this is what comes next, because when justice begins to happen in the lives of those who have only known pain, there is no going back. And Clarice's life, believe me, was about to become a true African tale, the kind you hear and cry over, but end with a heart full of hope. When Clarice reappeared on the sidewalk where it all began, she was no longer the same. She still wore simple clothes, still walked with Nigo by her side, but something about her had changed, and not just on the outside. Her gaze was different. It was firm, it was bright, it was certain. Like someone who, after being trampled by everyone, was finally recognized. And the craziest thing? It wasn't she who was looking for anything. It was he who returned. Charles Mboko, the same mysterious man who listened in silence, the same one who appeared on TV talking about the woman with the voice of an angel had sent for her, without fanfare, without an audience. He wanted to meet her respectfully, truly. And when he saw her, he only said one thing: "Now, the world will listen to you." The news spread like wildfire. "It's her, the one from the street." Suddenly, everyone who had once laughed, mocked, and cursed began to appear. People who had previously crossed the street to avoid her now came with fake hugs, forced compliments, and made-up stories like, "I always believed in you." But Charles was there, he saw it all, and he didn't let anyone approach with dirty intentions. "Now you want to applaud, right? But where were you when she was crying here alone, being called crazy?" He didn't shout, but the firmness of his words silenced everyone. An awkward silence fell over the room, and in that moment, Clarice saw something she had never seen before: respect. For the first time, they weren't trying to take anything from her. They were just looking. Not humiliating, not stepping on, just looking. And that's when everything changed forever. Charles didn't just help. He took a chance. He took Clarice to a simple hotel, gave her real food, a doctor, a hot shower. But, most importantly, he took her into a studio, a real one, with microphones, headphones, acoustics, and professional staff. At first, she trembled just walking into the room. She thought it was a mistake, that they'd laugh at her again. But he looked her in the eyes and said, "Sing your way, just the way you used to do on the street. That's what people need to hear." And Clarice sang. Her voice was shaky at first, but it only took a few seconds for magic to happen. Technicians stopped what they were doing. The sound engineer looked over his glasses. The producer, who had already heard hundreds of artists, swallowed hard, because her voice was pure truth. It was pain transformed into art. It was as if each note carried the soul of someone who had been through hell and still believed in heaven. And so, in just a few hours, Clarisse's first album began to take shape. The launch wasn't at just any event. It was on a stage, for real. People from all over came to watch. Artists, journalists, curious onlookers, but also people who had heard the songs online and said, "This voice heals me." And Clarisse, before beginning, took a deep breath, held the microphone with hands still scarred from her hard life, and said, "I used to sing this song to survive. Today I sing to live." The audience fell silent, and then she sang. And there, on that stage, she stopped being the beggar singing in the street and became something much greater. She became a symbol of resistance, of faith, of new beginnings. She walked from the street straight into the light, and the most beautiful thing, she did it without forgetting who she was. She remained simple. She continued to call Nigo her son. She continued to thank him for every plate of food as if it were her first. But now the world was listening. And who mocked her? Who kicked her, laughed at her, humiliated her? They now watched from afar. Some tried to force friendship, others apologized. But Clarisse didn't harbor hatred. She just wouldn't let anyone take away what she'd built. And Charles, always nearby, made a point of reminding her, "No one will use you anymore. You owe nothing to anyone. Everything you have, you earned, singing with your soul, even when the world tried to silence you." But the most incredible thing was yet to come, because a revelation about Clarisse's past, something even she didn't know, was about to be uncovered. And that, my friend, that will turn everything upside down. Because some stories end with applause, and there are others that have barely begun when the world thinks it's over. And hers, oh, hers was far from over. Clarisse's success wasn't just musical, it was spiritual. It was the kind of victory that doesn't fit in a trophy cabinet, because it wasn't just about winning. It was about surviving with a clean heart in a world that tried to dirty everything around her. Many people looked at her for years and saw only filth, begging, madness. They didn't see the heart. They didn't see the purpose. They didn't see God there, but He did. And in His time, things began to align in a way no one could have predicted. Because when God decides to exalt someone, no amount of rejection, mockery, or contempt can stop it. Clarisse was the one everyone called nobody, and that's precisely why she was chosen. Because heaven has a habit of using the forgotten to teach the proud. God uses the small to confound the great. And Clarisse, she was never trash. She was a jewel, one of those that time hides, pain molds, and faith reveals. A jewel the world almost lost because it was too busy judging its brilliance by the appearance of its packaging. And when she stepped onto that stage, microphone in hand and her soul cleansed, it wasn't just a performance, it was a testimony, a response from on high, a direct message. No one is invisible to God. He sees what no one else sees, and in due time, He raises up those everyone has trampled on. So keep this with you, because it's more than just a pretty phrase. It's a truth that Clarisse proved with her own life. Never underestimate those who sing to survive, because heaven listens before everyone else. If this story made you feel anything, whether it was emotion, hope, or even a desire to believe again, then it has already served an important purpose. Because sometimes all we need is a reminder that there is still beauty in even the most painful stories. And now, with a simple click, on like that's it. Enrollment, you're part of this too. Make this message reach further. Touch more people who, like you, carry a lot inside. People who need to hear that there's still a way, that there's still a new beginning. Comment below the word jewel, just so we know who really felt this story in their heart. And look, if there's one thing, want to know what happened next? Comment part 2 here in the comments, because Clarisse still has a lot to live for, and there's a revelation that will turn everything upside down. Now the video that appears over there, oh, this one is powerful, it's spine-chilling. The story is different, but it holds an invisible connection to everything you just watched. It will make you feel even more. There's something in this next video that provokes an even more intense emotion, and when you watch it, you'll understand why it appears right now.